So really, and that's why I talk about deep state analysis, deep edge versus shallow edge development. Understanding the stages, what did you learn in March? What have you learned on all permutations of ECBs? What have you learned under, various structures, or, if you've added one little thing into your game, you've added footprint into your game and type of, reversal patterns of, how are you constantly updating your game? The ability to cultivate state awareness. And it's kind of a little bit the purpose of today's workshop. Understanding the different states and where you're weak, and where you're strong, and what kind of setups and designs you have to get better on. Which state requires which skill sets. Waiting for the next state could bankrupt you in the process. I've heard this expression so many times. Oh, the market's, shit, I'll wait until it gets good. It might never get good because might not even know how you actually define what good is. So I've seen too many guys waiting for those good markets. Don't wait for good markets. Try and find edge now. And I know this workshop is kind of very, very high level, and we're going to start doing workshops on each of so-called individuals to try and classify some states and looking more like deep pattern recall. Documenting the environments. The guy who did the best, in March, he just traded 4 times in all of March. Just 4 to illustrate, a point. You could have the most volatile environment, but extract the maximum because you have 4 plays that you pretty much, think that you can extract the most from the money. And that's, whereas some guys could be highly active because that's who their personality is. You always have to also find what your personality is. And the permeable membranes between states. You don't just have a state and then it defines the next state. Okay, the state is closed shop now. We're all moving to the new state. It's the market's a dynamic organism that moves. So doing the hard work during each state, capturing the patterns between the states with the goal to locate patterns during every environment. And why you're documenting now is because that might come back later. It's like Andy's practicing, religiously the MOCs. Is active. Morris said, yes, Andy's active every night here. In his little, domain. But that is assembling the assets, playing for the long game, for when that returns. And the ability to deploy strategies, because that's the goal, is to deploy strategies in every environment and be highly effective in every environment. And so if you are one of those that have to get back, if one of those that the gulf has opened, you've been in profitable and there's that gap that widens, always ask yourself this question. Remember the practices and approaches and routine that got you there. Like I remember speaking, when I speak to Demetrius, speaking to Andy, Ollie, Tom, always remembering the practices, Alessandro, remembering the practices that got you there. I remember once Andy had a goal that he was reading a new kind of book on, was it once a month? Yeah, for a period. And all of a sudden he transitioned from a spread trader to a successful outright trader. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal to be able to do it with 8 kids and a wife. I mean, how many years were you coming in? I know you balance between since the opens change, but how many years did you come at 6:30 or 6:15? For how many years?
10 years, solid 10.
Solid 10 years. I mean, I sometimes get young guys coming onto the floor at 10 o'clock in the day. I mean, I think, well, what do you think you're going to compete with that? Because that's who you're up against. And you've got to look at yourself deeply. If you walk past the first floor and they're all there at 9 o'clock in the evening and you're going home because, the girlfriend's cooked you some lentils with, I don't know, sprinkled with some feta cheese. It doesn't make it any special. But if you're walking down there and you saw them, well, get back up to your desk. Because that's who you're up against. You think they're going to allow you to take any money from them? If we, this isn't a zero-sum game, but let's just for this example assume that, then what are you doing here even? and just because that is a state of they're gaining some deep experience of an event that's rare at that time. So just really whenever, I know the young guys, and that's why I showed you that graph right in the beginning, becoming the resilient learner. You'll think you figure it out, and all of a sudden you think, shit, I thought I figured it out. And then you haven't figured it out. And then you go again and you think you figured it out. Oh shit, my patterns work for 2 days. In fact, I've worked out the markets, the global markets. This strategy that I sell new gold lows, or I buy Bundeledge, or I do an IB break, or I buy an auction, a BTP auction or something, and I've figured out. No, you have to figure it out again, and the next, and you figure, and that slow little piecemeal work, piecemeal engineering in the background, just starts kind of putting the spokes. The brain is amazing at spotting patterns over time, but you have to give it space and time and creative energy in the process. Maintain your practice, build your program patterns. Double down when the going gets good again. When something's good and you're doing well, shift the gears of making sure your process is even harder. But if the going's bad, don't get lethargic in your practice, because then you're just going to slip even further behind. And loosening your expectations. I'll tell you when, it's so, I use Amadeo. When he first came, when he first came to myself and Demetrius, and he looked and said, "I want to be the biggest fucking trader you've ever seen." Like the very first thing he said, and I said, "Yeah, okay," but and Demetrius looked at him, "You're too cocky, man." And we looked and said, "Yeah, I'm going to buy out the prop business." And he said, "Wow, yeah, this is." And I think that was his thing, to show that he's confident and that he can do it. And then when he came out and said the same thing with the table tennis, then we figured out his game. No, I knew he was there. So the whole thing is loosening. So what happens when he's so confident, this is where most young guys struggle at the beginning of their career, is they come because they've watched The Wolf of Wall Street, or they've watched something, they think this game gives you $1 million in 6 months. And when you don't get the rewards in the first 18 months, 2 years, who the hell, it's because it's a game that you can just rock up and click a mouse. You can't just rock up and end up and just play against Federer at the Grand Slam final. But in this game, you can play against Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, what's the Italian player? Fornini, Fabio Fornini. You can't just or Waka Yunus. You can't just rock up and play against these people and thinking that I'm going to make, because you're up against these guys that have cultivated a practice over a very long period of time, And so, loosening, and this is why, what happens is, so for example, as an example, I'm a tireless worker, so committed, but he first had to iron out his expectations of where he should be in this game. Because sometimes where expectations would be based on building a powerful process, finding those patterns, testing yourself, putting yourself in uncomfortable areas. That is where you expand in that space. And then just to kind of finish off, just the environment of the future. Who knows what the things can change in the future? We saw what we saw in March. When it happened in 2008 and 2009, that still hung around for like a year and a half. March was the V-shaped volatility reversal that not many have seen. So maybe in the future you have a one-day March and the next day low volatility. So we don't, but we can adjust, because we as humans we adjust. We're very effective if we've got a good learning process, practices, approaches. But then perhaps your memory retrieval faster. The thing that I'm working on the most at the moment is all of our training in the future is actually your edges, your learning architecture, how you learn, how you digest patterns. So I'm researching a lot on retrieval skills, how people learn more efficiently, how effective is your learning strategy, immersion versus reflection. I had a nice healthy debate with Isaac a couple of weeks ago. And so just trying to contemplate what are powerful ways to learn more efficient, quicker, because the person who can remember, I remember that ECB, 20 ECBs a day that fell on an NFP or ECB, or Wacker saying, yeah, I remember that MSC at 8:59, 25 years ago, and then, so those types of memory retrieval skills starts becoming an edge. And your market selection, maybe one day gold is moving like crazy, and the very next day it tends to Euribor and the bund starts moving, crazy. So are you effective to just select which market because you have strong technical proficiency? Anyway, so just to close off, is for all the younger guys having that learning resilience and understanding you transitioning all between states, and you think you figured out and then you don't, just have that perseverance and persistence. And for the experienced guys, keep on maintaining the practices and don't fall off the cliff through your processes or your routines.
If you find this video interesting, if you want to go deep into the Axia training method and how our trading team of 7-figure traders develop setups and strategies and how they learn to build the most profitable trades across all market environments, then join me in this workshop. Now in this workshop, you're going to learn 3 powerful steps we use to train all our traders on both our London and our Poland trading desks to help build incredible levels of consistency. How to predictably understand which setups work and which don't. You're going to learn our 2 main strategies for how we perfect our trade timing before we enter every single trade. You're going to learn the VEL concept, which is our one and only technique we use to leverage our largest trades. You'll also learn how to avoid trading setups that don't work, how to avoid those large losses, and our main method we use to identify them that saves our traders significant amounts of capital. Finally, you will learn how our traders use the power of network learning to find market patterns quicker than ever before, so you shortcut that learning curve. In the workshop, we want to program your awareness of elite performance, to program your ability to choose the right setups, and program your ability to be a consistent trader. So the trades that you execute become more simple and clearer. And I can tell you this, you'll never see the markets the same again. You'll never look at the markets with a narrow view of getting lost in all the noise and confusion. You'll take your first step towards a deep edge market awareness. I cannot wait for you to join me in this workshop. And I think you're in for a massive paradigm shift in your understanding of how to develop as a trader. So join me by clicking on the top right-hand corner of the screen and sign up for this powerful training workshop, or visit elitetraderworkshop.com.